should gunmakers be sued over mass shootings? Well, a split decision in a state Supreme Court in Connecticut is allowing that to happen. Of course, this follows the massacre in Newtown. Let's bring in our guest this morning. He joins us from time to time here on America's First News. Edwin Walker is with U.S. Law Shield, program attorney with U.S. Law Shield, one of the country's leading voices on the Second Amendment. Edwin, thank you for joining us here on America's First News. We appreciate it as always.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
So what exactly did the state high court rule?
Yes, in Connecticut, the state high court, first of all, there is a federal law, it's been on the books since 2005, that says that gun manufacturers, gun wholesalers, gun retailers cannot, they have a protection, they have an immunity from being sued or being found liable whenever somebody uses one of their products to commit a crime. Basically, it's a very logical law. It says, look, people who commit crimes are responsible for their individual crimes. Gun manufacturers not liable, not responsible. Now, it doesn't, exempt it from everything. It is exempted, the exemption doesn't apply whenever the gun manufacturer retailer acts unlawfully, which is actually happening with regard to a lawsuit down here in Texas with regard to the Sutherland Springs case at the exact same time as this other case in Connecticut is taking place. And so all these folks have to comply with the law. If they do, then they have this immunity. So that's what happened is that up in, Newtown, the parents of the, Sandy Hook children sued Remington, the maker of the Bushmaster rifle. And the trial judge threw the case out, said, no, you can't sue them. They have this immunity. Well, the case eventually made it to the Connecticut Supreme Court, where the Connecticut Supreme Court 4-3 has ruled that they're not this law doesn't cover Remington because they're not suing about the rifle. They're suing about how the rifle was marketed, and therefore, since it was marketed, since it doesn't protect the marketing of the rifle, then they can still ultimately possibly be found liable. But what it does is it's going to send it back to the trial court for an actual trial. And this is all part of the, it's all part of the plan that caused this law to be put in place in the first place, because the anti-gun folks figured that they could sue manufacturers and put such a financial burden on them that it would put them out of business, because they knew that there would be juries out there that would be swayed, by sympathy and emotion towards crime victims, that they ultimately would rule against manufacturers. So, as it's here today, Remington not been found liable, but they are going to have to go to trial.
They're essentially saying they groomed this kid with advertisements. Did they point to any specific ads or just in general?
Well, there's one ad that I've seen that the media has kind of latched onto that I guess they used in their argument. There was an ad, they dug up an ad for Bushmaster somewhere that said something like, your man card is hereby reissued or something like that. I guess the thought is that, get yourself a Bushmaster AR rifle, and it's a very masculine weapon to have. And so, so if you're a real man, you'll use a Bushmaster. Now, obviously, the whole thing where this all falls apart, if people look at it objectively, which of course the anti-gun folks, it's impossible for them to look at things objectively. But if you look at it objectively, they weren't marketing to Adam Lanza. They weren't marketing to him because he didn't purchase the rifle. In fact, he stole the rifle. He murdered his mother and stole the rifle. So it doesn't matter what their marketing was.
Yeah,
that criminal act in and of itself should absolve anybody except Adam Lanza for any responsibility in this terrible, terrible tragedy.
How much of this, we're speaking with Edwin Walker, a program attorney with U.S. Law Shield, the families in Newtown, Connecticut, now able to sue the gun manufacturer of the weapon used in that massacre. how much of this has to do with the weapon used, the specific weapon used, in your opinion? I mean, if this is kind of a stretch going after the advertisement, the company's, the ads, how much of this has to do with that weapon used and the commonality of it being used in other shootings?
Well, this is all... This certainly is all tied together. Now, over the course of the last 15 years or so that this law has been in effect, numerous gun manufacturers have used it. Glock used it in a very prominent case. There was also a case out in Colorado where the victims of the Aurora Theater shooting tried to use it against not only the manufacturer but also the retailer who sold the gun and the ammunition. Which that's the thing about it. One thing you also have to look at is this is a war. Whenever the anti-gun folks realize that they many times are precluded from going after the weapon itself, they're going to start, and they have started, nibbling around the edges. They'll start attacking what ammunition people can get and what accessories people can get, and those sorts of things, putting a tax on ammunition. And they'll use this very glib argument, well, we're not attacking the guns. Nobody says that, the Second Amendment doesn't protect all this other stuff, and we can regulate it, and which is ridiculous. But yes, getting back to your original question, the AR rifle is that is the weapon that they have chosen to demonize in this, and it is simply because it's the most popular. That's why most folks who are anti-gun usually don't know anything about guns, and so all rifles are ARs to them, and all handguns are Glocks, simply because those are basically the two most prevalent types of firearms in those two categories, rifles and handguns. And so, it is, it is true that the AR is used in a lot of these extremely tragic events, and it's simply because it is the most popular. It's a modular platform that has been licensed to be built by dozens and dozens of different manufacturers. Yeah. And so it's not a specific type of model that's limited to a specific individual manufacturer. And so when you say AR, covers dozens and dozens of different models.
Yeah. And now the burden is you need to prove that they specifically marketed it to that shooter. Edwin, we appreciate your time as always. We'll check back in with you. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right. Edwin Walker is a program attorney with U.S. Law Shield, one of the country's leading voices on the Second Amendment. You can find Edwin Walker on Twitter as well as U.S. Law Shield.